This week's Otosot's a bit unusual because for complicated logistical reasons Jonny is minding the shop on his own, but ironically here's me popping up at the beginning to tell you that we're doing some more live recordings, 3 of them in fact, starting with one at the Mini Factory in Oxford on Thursday the 28th of November. After that we'll be back at the Aston Workshop Car Barn in Beamish, County Durham on Wednesday the 18th of December. And in the new year we'll be at the Mallory Hall in Eastbourne on Thursday the 6th of February. Tickets for all 3 shows are on sale now. Just go to smithandsniff.com, follow the signs for live shows, and you'll find links to the tickets there. Hope to see you in the audience soon. And now, here's Jonny.
Hey, welcome to Otosot on the other side of things, where we answer your questions, which you've emailed to us in letter form. Electric letter form. Let's start with a question, because that's the way this works. We've got a question from AJ Jones. I've got a question, they say. I don't know if they're a he or a she. I've got a question that I'm well aware I could Google and probably get the answer in about 5 seconds, but where's the bloody fun in that? I was talking about cars with my 22-year-old stepdaughter the other day, and out of nowhere, she regaled me with this nugget of apparent automotive fact, in inverted commas, as she puts it. Apparently, the patent for heated front windscreens is owned by Forwards. And that's why some lower spec cars of any other make don't come with a heated screen, as it isn't worth the company paying for the licence if the car isn't that valuable. Is that actually true? I'm 42 years old, have been into cars for almost my entire life and have never heard this fact before. Thought you were the guys to ask. Keep up the good work, CMTMB. Well, AJ, I don't actually know this for a fact, but recently I got in touch with Pilkington Glass to order a windscreen for my Austin Allegro Type R project, and I have managed to order it with a heated windscreen, heating element inside the screen, that little mesh, and I'm absolutely sure that Faults invented that. But I'm going to just double check, because I think they invented it as far back as the 80s. I am absolutely sure that the first car I ever saw it in was a Ford Orion, but I might be wrong. It might have been a Mondeo. So some people are saying the 1985 Ford Scorpio/Granada Mark III in Europe. Okay, with a very thin mesh of heating wires within the layers of glass. And then some people are saying it was the Mondeo. Well, this is really interesting listening, isn't it? See, I do actually think it was Pilkington who made it, and it was Ford who designed it. And that's what I'm going to stick to. And I can't hear Richard shouting, so that's what I'm going to say. I'm pretty sure it was also an 80s invention. And if I'm telling fables, then please, you can just email me and tell me that I'm being an utter flute. In fact, AJ, you do start your email, the title says, "Hello, you pair of flutish SSGs." Well, thank you very much. You're an SSG for contacting us. This one is from Daniel Bevis, who Dan's a friend of the show. Sweet guy, motoring journalist. Hello, I have an Otosot question for you. This one's fun. This morning I was in the waiting room of a local garage and there was someone else in there who was having their car MOT'd. The receptionist informed her, with a pleasing sense of barely disguised glee, that the car had failed its MOT on the fact that it didn't have any headlight bulbs. And her, frankly incredible response was, "Oh, I did wonder why I was having such difficulty seeing at night." To clarify, it wasn't that the headlight bulbs had failed, the car literally didn't have any bulbs in it, which raises so many different questions. So Dan's question to us is, what's the most baffling MOT failure you've ever experienced or heard of? And it's followed by CMTMB, etc., etc. What is the most baffling MOT failure? Well, I'm pretty sure you can't fail. I know you can't fail a car with no windscreen, and you can't fail a car with no windscreen wipers if there's no screen. That in the UK, that is a fact. And I don't think you can fail a car with no bonnet, and I don't think you can fail a car with no doors as long as you've got seatbelts, so you're held in place inside the car. But that isn't really answering your question, is it, Dan? I'm going to come back to this one. I'm going to think about it because I know my brother's seen some absolute terrors, even though he's not an MOT inspector. He has a garage, like an MOT garage, on the same industrial estate as his, and he tells me some brilliant stories all the time. So, I do know one where a car failed its MOT because it had, in their words, homemade brake pads. They looked like, and they'd made them themselves, and I don't know what material they were using, what kind of abrasive material, but it wasn't a real brake pad. I mean, it's sending shivers down my spine just thinking about what the hell that would entail. But yeah, homemade brake pads. But there'll be a few more, so I'm going to come back, if that's all right, Dan. I will come back to you on that one. Good question. And I still don't understand who took the bulbs out of that lady's car. Did she take them out? Because that's just weird. Now we've got a question from Nadeem Rahim. Hi, guys. When was the last time you felt a deep desire within your heart that you had to own a car? I'm asking you this because I've been watching the launch videos of the new Porsche GT3 Touring, which now comes with back seats, and I now have the strongest urge to do everything in my power to own one within the next couple of years. It's just absolute perfection. Rear-wheel drive, NA, flat six, 4 seats, manual gearbox, and great looks. I last had this feeling with my current two cars. With my current car 2 years ago, a Montreal Green Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. My gosh, Nadeem, you've got good car taste. That's still one of the coolest cars out there right now. That colour. And before that, he said, with an Indy Yellow Pearl Honda S2000. I wanted both cars so much that I flew all the way to Belfast to buy them both. Not at the same time, obviously, and drove them back to Portsmouth over a weekend. I can highly recommend doing this, by the way, as you get to experience the joy of driving your brand new to you car through North Wales early on a Sunday morning, and I'm not sure I've ever been happier. And yes, I'm married with a child. Cheers, mate. Thanks, mate. Bye. With no spaces in between. Nadeem, you're right, you know. I like going on a little trip to buy a car, especially if you've allocated enough time. That's always really good, and it just feels extra special, doesn't it? It probably makes the car feel more, I don't know, it feels like you've earned it more. So this is cool. The new GT3 Touring 911 is great. It's probably the best. It's probably my favourite 911. I know Porter really enjoys it. And I do think that, yeah, it's one of those cars. I've actually got a very strong urge right now, several. One of them is a 997 GT3. I know I'm going to be a Porsche bore, I know. So there's that. Because the 997 GT3 was a car that I drove when it was new in period, and it just blew my socks off. And I've probably said this before. I've looked at prices of them, and I do think it's an exceptional car that I don't think you'd ever tire of. And also, it's a narrower body than a current 911. And because of that, certainly with UK roads, you can probably use it a little bit more because it fits on the road just a little bit more. Here's a question from Robert Fraser. Hello, you pair of SSGs. Sweet guys. Thanks, yous, for... I don't know if he's done that on purpose. Thanks, yous, for all of the laughs you give me on my ride to work. I do get some strange looks when I'm riding along and I burst into a hearty laugh. Well, absolute pleasure, Rob. I've got 2 questions. 1, scrapyard price fluctuations. In the olden days, have you ever bought something for a car and then had to go and get some money for them, for the price has changed significantly? For example, I bought a wing mirror for my first car. a B-Reg Vauxhall Nova Saloon, light green with a matching and checked brown interior. Mirror 1 was £5. I had to go to the cash machine to get some more money, and on my return, the second mirror had doubled in price. Oh yeah, lots of inconsistency. I've had that for, because that's back when I think scrapyards just used to guess a price, or depending on who was on duty that day, they just go, oh well, that's £2 because we haven't been able to sell it, or we can sell these easily. That's a tenner. That definitely happened. I used to be able to get switches for things like minis, Austin minis, and they were usually £1 each. But sometimes you'd go there and they were £2 each or £2.50. I actually felt really incensed about that. Like I was going to write to my MP. That can't be right. That kind of jumped up just like that. That's ridiculous. I was talking to Rich in our main podcast about scrapyard stuff only recently. And yeah, my brother used to buy tyres from scrapyards, part-worn tyres. And again, it was one of those where there was absolutely no correlation of tyre size and wear for the money. So you really could just kind of sift through the pile and go, oh, there's a Pirelli there. Oh, I'll have that Pirelli because that's £5. Whereas you could get a no-name tyre for the same money. But who would do that? Oh, Rob's got a second question, of course, because he said, I've got 2 questions. Question 2, this one might involve needing Richard, who's not here. The Veyron Power Lap on Top Gear, when you did the timed lap with that there Veyron. Who managed to put the massive dent in the driver's side sill, and how did they do it? Well, that's a question for Richard Porter. Because I don't really know, because I've never worked on Top Gear. Right, question from Aaron Hussein. Hello, Richard and Jonny. I hope you're doing very well. What a lovely start to the conversation, Aaron. Thank you. A thought occurred to me lately. Nearly every time I'm out on the open roads, there are moments of mutual respect and admiration from fellow classic car owners that cross paths with me. For some daft reason, I call them road waves. Oh, I like a road wave. A superb example was on the A1 near Stamford in the middle of summer. That's where I live, Aaron. On my way back home from work, I was driving my 1985 Mercedes 230e. I might have seen you when a light blue 1965 Ford Mustang notchback overtook on the outside lane. We clocked each other. Our heads nudged. Okay. Our heads nudged, and we each exchanged a relaxed thumbs up, wave and smile as we sailed along into the sunset. Every time such interactions take place, it creates a fabulous sense of belonging, inclusion and positivity in a time when we arguably need it. Other cars which I've made road waves with include a Mark 1 Ford Granada, E30 Beamer Touring and a wonderfully brown Talbot Horizon. My question to you guys is, what's the best and or quirkiest road wave you've ever exchanged in your cars? Jonny, I would love to know in particular what other classics have thumbed up your Dodge. I've been thumbed up by, it sounds wrong, I've been thumbed up by a guy in a classic coach before. So a full-size, coach. And he did it. And it was, I think it was 1968 coach. So actually the same year as the Charger. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I've never had that before. I have been thumbed up. Well, I actually got train horned whilst in my Dodge by Terry Grant, the stunt driver. We were both on our way back, I'm guessing, from the Goodwood Revival. And Terry's got this enormous RV, American motorhome, with a very elaborate race trailer on the back. But I didn't see him coming up behind me because the Dodge doesn't have very large mirrors. And he did a drive-by train horning, which nearly made me swerve off the road, which is difficult in the Dodge because it's about 18 turns for lock to lock. So that definitely happened. But I've been thumbed up before by some really, really unusual stuff. Some very unusual stuff. I got thumbed up once when I was in my Beetle by a person in a Porsche Speedster, and it was a genuine one. And it really blew me away because the thing about Porsche owners is they sometimes they distance themselves from air-cooled Volkswagens. They don't want to be associated, which I think is sad and slightly car racist. So that's definitely happened before. I want to know if do you know what? It's happened. I've actually noticed it's not just happening in classic cars. It happens in new Volkswagen Transporters. I was in a VW multivan, which aka the T7, and that I got lots of thumbs up in that from T6 people, and even a couple of classic Volkswagen people, which I thought was very unusual. And I also got in the Ineos Grenadier, this is a while ago now, I got a thumbs up from someone in a Daihatsu 4-track, which I thought was confusing but also nice, because they could just tell that I was a member of a real off-roader brigade, not an SUV, a real off-roader. But yeah, do you know what, Aaron, you've hit the nail on the head there. It is really heartwarming and it is good fun. And at the end of the day, when you're driving around in an old car, there is this element of escapism and harking back to a simpler, possibly happier time, or certainly less complicated. And that's what it's about. And you've got to embrace that. So it is lovely. It's sort of cosplay, as I've said before. Thanks for that. Good letter. CMTMB. This one's from Ian Patrick. Hi, USSGs. I was wondering, do you guys use cars as a means of attributing value to things? Case in point here. My wife, who looks for holidays as much as I look for cars, will turn to me and say, should we go to Spain for a week with the kids? It's about $3,000. My brain immediately jumps to the automotive, and I'll reply with something along the lines of, oh, well, that's a clean low mileage Mark V GTI. Ian, you should really think these things and not say them. She bloody hates this, yeah, surprise, surprise, but I can't seem to help it. Even when I catch myself on, I end up in silence, wearing a face that looks like I'm trying to work out, did I just shart? And she'll say, you're thinking about what car you could buy instead, aren't you? Do other men do this, like yourselves? And if so, what's your de facto measurement for $1,000 or for 5k, etc.? Cheers, mate, comma, thanks, mate, comma, bye. P.S. I've recently tried to make it more applicable to the location, e.g. going to Italy for $2,000. Well, that's a tidy Alfa Brera without subframe rot. It's as good. I like this one. The short answer is 100% have I done this. I've done this when... Do you know what? I've done this when house hunting in the past, when trying to knock money off buying a house or working out how much it would cost to do up a certain part of the house. And you think, no, that's going to need 25 grand spending on it. And you go, 25 grand, that's a Lotus Sunbeam in very good condition, that is, or something like that. But yeah, I absolutely do it. I'm trying to think what my de facto measurement is, because I like yours. That's a good one. Well, do you know what my de facto measurement is right now, which is probably a little bit too much, is hovering around the 10 grand mark. You can get a Honda E with not a lot of miles on the clock, which I think is a stone cold future classic, as well as being a fun, fantastic, quirky Honda product. So there's that. But yeah, I do often, in the past, I have probably been the dampener of holiday spirit, thinking about exactly what you've just said. And like exactly, when you start to talk about holidays and around about 5 grand, you do go, oh, that's... Or even, it's not just a full car. It's like, that's an engine rebuild on a blah, blah, blah. That's Yeah, that's a Windows out repaint, that is. I'd like to know what other people think, though, to Ian's question. If you want to write to us, you know the address. It's hello@smithandsniff.com. Got a question from a chap called Dan Ellard. Morning, you absolute flutes. A bolshy start, I know, but I've had my morning cafe au lait intenso. With the announcement of the new Ferrari F80, surely someone has to try and organise a hypercar megatest between the GMA T50, the Aston Martin Valerie, the McLaren W1, the Ferrari F80, the Mercedes AMG 1, the Pagani Utopia, the Koenigsegg Regera, the Bugatti Chiron Super Sports versus that Porsche thingy when it comes out, versus Rimac What's It, versus, well, you get the idea. Holy frig, there's a lot of hypercars about now. There's too many rich people about, but great for the neutral, I suppose. I suspect Amazon are the only ones with the clout and the money to have a chance of getting all of these together to do a mega test. Firstly, are you interested? And secondly, what would you choose? And thirdly, would you even bother? I suspect not. Love and hugs. #CMTMB. Nice. Okay. Mega tests. I do. I mean, they're really hard to organise. Certainly from the magazine days, they were always tricky to do, and you always feel like you're rushing it because there's so many things to remember, stats. There's so many. If you're going to try and do an accurate test, I know the Holy Trinity in 2012, whenever it was 2013. With the 918 Spider and the P1 and the LaFerrari. That was quite legendary. I know Chris Harris did a very, very good video involving Tiff Nadell, which I thought was ace. Am I bothered? I'm not hugely bothered, to be honest, because I think Richard's similar to me. A lot of the cars that I dream about are cars which I feel are attainable at some point in my life, and a lot of those are probably not attainable. And a lot of these cars, the reason why they're increasing in launches of hypercars, as they're now called, is because people buy them and just collect them, and often don't use them very much. And they've become, I think they've become less exciting because the market's saturating, and also. All I ever think about, which could be a slight dad comment, all I ever think about is like, where are you going to use that to even 30-40% of its capability? Where are you going to use that? But just browsing through your list, what am I interested in? I don't think I'm interested in the AMG 1. The Bugatti, it's the Tourbillon's the one that I'm probably more interested in. The Chiron's never massively interested me. I have driven a Veyron and it was okay. I was more turned on by the engineering than the actual drive of it. The McLaren W1 is going to be exciting, yes. Valkyrie, yes, but I prefer the other one, the Victor. They've only made one or two, haven't they? I think the Victor is more exciting to me. It's cooler. GMA T50, I'm not completely sold on the way it looks. However, I would love to drive one. And I'm actually interested in that car because of it being a 3-seater and lots of luggage. So I feel like there's something very cool about that. But I think out of all of those, I've always thought to myself, if I was ever going to buy a ridiculous car or at some point, I don't know, wake up with loads of money in the bank, I do like the Koenigsegg brand. There's something about Koenigsegg. It's the way it's... I don't know. There's just something about Koenigsegg, the quality, the way they look at things. Christian looks at things from a different angle. I just think he's quite an interesting guy. You're right though, Dan. Amazon are probably the only people that will get that together for maybe the new breed of Grand Tour, or these days well-connected YouTubers who do that sort of car. Who do hypercars. I'm a YouTuber that doesn't really do hypercars because I prefer to spend my time doing more attainable vehicles. Right, time for another one, as DJ Khaled would say. This is from Zach Galea. Hi Smith, hi Sniff. I've been listening to Otosot 23 and was reminded of my first car, a flamenco red 2006 Peugeot 206, optimistically called Skyline, which was marketing speak for panoramic roof. 1.4 HDI. This was originally my mum's car, which I inherited when I finally got my licence. Anyway, back in 2016, I remember wondering if I should get my 206's airbags inspected and discussing the matter with my dad. A few days after this discussion, I would eventually put those airbags to the test. After an equally red Seat Ibiza drove out of a side street attempting to cross a 2-lane main road, only to find me desperately braking my 10-year-old 206 into the side of the Ibiza. Thankfully, the airbags worked just fine, and no one was hurt, besides the bruised ego of a 21-year-old driver, but I would love to hear what sort of maintenance airbags should get from any knowledgeable listeners. Anyway, my question for you is actually this. Is an X-Type Jaguar worth considering the chances of finding an XJR, or an XJ for that matter, in Malta are slim? Or would I just be getting a fake, in inverted commas, Jag? I find myself looking at Jags a lot lately, and I've been wondering about the X-Type and the S-Types, with the former being rarer but occasionally appearing on the used car market. I seem to remember Top Gear describing it as a Mondeo in drag. As a background, I am from Malta, an island of about 500,000 inhabitants. The car market here is mostly saturated with Japanese imports like Toyota Yaris and Suzuki Swifts, and very bland hatchbacks with more interesting cars, only very occasionally making their way onto the second-hand market. And my dream is to own an Alfa Romeo and a Jag at some point in my life. And although one can dream, I have to be practical considering the market. I still regret having missed the opportunity to buy a red Alfa 166 Phase 1 with a 2.5-litre V6 Busso. Oh, cheers, Zach. Zach, I've never been to, I know it's a slightly detoured, I've never been to Malta. I nearly went this year. I'd love to go to Malta, and I know the Maltese car scene is fascinating, and obviously right-hand drive. I know we, British people, have plundered it for right-hand drive, rear-wheel drive faults and such like. So I'd love to come over and possibly buy a car and bring it back and document that one day. That would be cool. Sorry to hear about your Peugeot 206 having its airbags deployed. Now, X-Type Jags. Remember, there's a multitude of different types. They did an all-wheel drive one, they did a V6 one. So, and yes, it was poo-pooed as being a Mondeo in an evening gown or an expensive suit. I think with the Mondeo dying and the Mondeo that it was based on being a very good car, let's not forget that, it was a good car. The X-Type is pretty cool, but I think the X-Type Estate is the one to get because it was, I think the back end was designed by Ian Callum, sweet guy, friend of the show. But also, it just looks better. I think it just looks better. So getting a high-spec X-Type Estate, I think, would be quite cool. And also, you're a young guy, so any young guys driving around in Jags, I think the world needs these days. But you also briefly mentioned S-Type. Now, I don't know if there's many S-Types on the Maltese Islands, but I like the S-Type. And I know they did the S-Type R, which is probably beyond your reach, but S-Types subtly, like OEM plus, modify really well. They look good. And those later ones which had the dechroming and things on them, I like. And they're actually a well-made car, the S-Type, and they handle brilliantly. So my money would be on an S-Type. So go and do that, please. And we can live through you, Zach, because I think that would be a fantastic car. I think we've got to wrap this up, actually. Although we've had so many letters, so many letters. But thanks ever so much to everyone that writes to us. Thanks for listening to the main podcast as well as this Otosot sideline podcast. And I'm really sorry that Richard is still otherwise engaged, I think. As is always the way, thanks for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us a lovely comment on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, and that keeps us afloat. And we have new merchandise, which will be increasing as time goes on towards the back end of this year. So go and have a look in our new merch shop, which is on our website. Thank you ever so much. As they say in show business, cheers, mate. Thanks, mate. Bye.